Marker.
There was that kind of energy around the project. We felt like we were a part of something really special.
There's a real timeless quality to not only the look of it, but also the message.
It was a great experience.
When anyone asked me what movie I was most proud of working on, I said Gattaca.
Andrew was so clear in his mind about what he wanted it to look like.
Jersey Films produced the movie. Danny DeVito, Michael Shamberg, Stacey Sher. Danny DeVito especially was involved and a real champion of the movie.
I remember falling in love with it immediately when I read it.
You begin it thinking, potentially this could be a piece of cake, this could be easy, but every movie has its challenges.
Because of the budgetary limitations of the movie, we didn't have the money to come up with an entirely new world, a futuristic world to create. Instead of creating an entire new future, they would just take the best elements of the past and kind of drag it with us into the near future.
Andrew, you know, I tell you, I liked Andrew the first time I met him. I was very lucky and excited to work with somebody as talented as Andrew.
He believed in Gattaca, and he knew it was his shot, and he wanted to make it great.
He had a pit bull type quality where he'd latch onto a scene.
Andrew created a world, and he pretty much was able to do whatever he wanted with it.
He's great with images and metaphor and allegory. I mean, and there's very few directors working in cinema today that even use allegory or metaphor.
Part of the way that Andrew works is he will create these large poster boards that represent the character of the location.
Isolated little groupings of photographs and things cut from magazines, newspapers, whatever, that said the look of maybe the housing development where the degenerates would live, the look of Gattaca inside.
And it's a great way for him to, you know, sit down with a production designer, a cinematographer, the costume designer, essentially say, here, look, this is, you know, how I'm envisioning this project to look like when it's finished.
We did about 2 weeks of rehearsal. That's another great thing about a writer-director is that he can adeptly alter the script to suit its performers. You cast Ernest Borgnine, you make it work for Ernest Borgnine.
What about you, Your Majesty? You dreaming of space?
Ethan Hawke was the first actor that was actually cast in the movie. He had just done a film called Reality Bites with Jersey Films.
Congratulations.
Well, what about the interview?
That was it.
They wanted to get him with Uma Thurman.
Didn't the director threaten to cancel your mission more than once, Jerome?
Yes, he did.
Somebody did you a favor.
And they'd always wanted to work together, and here was a perfect opportunity. It just was like a perfect combination. The chemistry was there. So first it was Ethan Hawke, and then Uma Thurman came aboard, and ultimately Jude Law was cast.
I think I was being kind of checked out by everyone because no one knew who I was. I was this young whippersnapper from England.
His first film, Jude Law, yeah. And it was you know, the cast was great.
Jude Law at the time had not done an American film. He was in a Broadway play with Kathleen Turner at the time called Indiscretions that our casting director, Francine Maisler, had seen while she was in New York. And she thought that he would just be perfect to play this character.
You still don't understand, do you? When they look at you, they don't see you anymore, they only see me.
There was something magic about working with Jude. Our scenes, we have a lot of scenes in our apartment. You know, I'm going to the refrigerator and we're yelling at each other.
My God, what's wrong with the machine?
There's nothing wrong with the machine. It's a hot sample. You've been drinking again.
I haven't.
Oh, Christ, Eugene. It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
I haven't.
Yeah, Ethan and I just never let the ball down, really. We had a very similar way of working, and we go and rehearse on the set, so that it really felt like our apartment.
Lauren Dean's coming to the apartment. He's got to drag himself up the staircase, and I'm hiding down beneath it. And then the scene with Uma outside the apartment. Those scenes felt very special to me because I knew that we were discovering a huge talent in Jude.
It was a kind of, you know, living the dream moment, really. I'd only done theatre prior to that. I was still green enough to kind of tip up and watch when everyone else was working. I went to watch Alan Arkin at the raid scene because I've been a huge fan of Alan Arkin's for years.
Don't touch your face, don't swallow, don't spit. Let's clean his teeth.
Someone who stands out in particular was Detective Hugo, played by acting legend Alan Arkin. And he was a pleasure to work with. He really believed in the story and the message of the movie.
I say we test again.
Tess, I cannot allow you to disrupt operations any further.
You're not at all concerned about having a murderer in your midst?
Right now, your presence is creating more of a threat.
Gore Vidal. I love you, Gore Vidal. Really a treat.
Gore Vidal is not, you know, an experienced actor, and that was really fun and interesting to watch him try to do these scenes.
I don't have to tell you how important this expedition is.
Andrew had this great idea for an opening sequence, and there was no money to shoot it at the beginning of the movie. So he and I figured out, you know, how we could put this thing together.
The skin flakes and the hair strands are actually plastic models that were created specifically for this sequence by the visual effects department.
We settled on a more traditional high-speed camera approach, building sort of bigatures, gigantic miniatures of all the objects, and then shooting those on a stage that was supposed to look like a really close-up view of the makeup table that he used to prepare himself for work every day. Basically turned on the Photosonics high-speed camera and shot them dropping out of the sky at 360 frames per second. Burned up a lot of film. The hairs were also bigatures. Basically, they were sort of big wires. They were about that big around and maybe 4 or 5 feet long, and we dropped a bunch of those.
We did quite a bit of storyboarding for the movie. We used a guy named Trevor Goring, who's a really gifted illustrator, and he worked throughout pre-production with Andrew Niccol and Jan Rolfs to lay out a number of the more technically challenging scenes in the movie, such as Jerome climbing up the stairs, the spiral staircase in the apartment building, Jerome running across the street where the cars are, he can't see, and he's running across the highway and the cars are, you know, zooming back and forth.
Come on, we'll miss it!
Come on, we'll miss it.
Sławomir Idziak, a very renowned Polish cinematographer, shot the movie. Andrew was familiar with the work that he had done on a lot of Krzysztof Kieślowski's films. Really a gifted artist.
The work of the cinematographer Sławik and the production designer Jan were part of each and every frame of Gattaca.
One of the reasons the film holds up so well over time is Jan Rolf's production design. He was able to do so much with so little on this movie.
I was just so thrilled with the look that Jan and Andrew came up with, because I think that the kind of classic retro, clean lines, a lot of aluminum, a lot of nickel, black. I think, if I do say so myself, I think it's a fabulous looking picture.
It was a movie where architecture really was a character in the film. And each of those buildings was chosen specifically because of what it said and what it indicated, either in terms of the storyline or in terms of the individual character.
I wasn't used to that. You know, Andrew drove me bananas worrying about the frame. He is a real aestheticist. You know, I mean, he cares about how things look.
We used the headquarters of the DWP downtown, which had this helical staircase and sort of the imagery of having the helix in the background for Blair Underwood's character being the doctor, the geneticist. There are lots of visual winks and nods to the storyline that Andrew incorporated through the Jan and Bob's sort of collaboration.
When I first heard about the project, I was working on a film with Danny DeVito, and he said, you know, Em, you're going to love this movie. It's all about props, and there are all these great props. There's urine and semen and blood. I was like, oh, goody. Every prop was a challenge. Everything had to be perfect. Everything was going to be under a great deal of scrutiny. All around us all the time there are pieces of life. There are mites and skin and hair and bits of little orts all over the place all the time. So we wanted to be able to see those whirling around in the vortex of the vacuum cleaner. So we made glass vacuum cleaners.
I was pitching my idea for the complicated whirligig to Andrew, and he said, no, just make it look like this. It was supposed to be the inside of the finger pricking mechanism that all the Gattaca employees stick their finger on in the beginning of the movie. Andrew and I designed a version of this thing that would show the audience what was actually happening inside this machine, and there's probably no way that this thing would have actually fit inside of the turnstile that was, that was displayed in the movie, but it did tell the story, and it was basically kind of a side view of a bunch of syringes that spun around, and every time it would rotate into frame, it would fill up with blood, and then it would rotate out of frame, and the next one would come, and then you cut to the people outside, and they're sticking their finger on it. With a sound effect or two, it worked great.
To this day, it's the only movie I ever worked on where I was scouting for an angle or a curve or the side of a building. For example, the Great Western Forum was used for the DNA testing center. All we used there was really the outside colonnade, which curves, and we used the ticket window there at the Forum.
Irene takes the sample hair she's gotten out of Vincent's desk to make sure that he really is what he appears to be. And she goes to a walk-up gene testing facility, and she gets back a computer printout, and the tubes, the plastic tubes, were underwear containers. There was a certain kind of really disgusting men's underwear that was for sale at the time, and they came in those tubes.
Choice of the cars, which are retro cars in a sense, but the choice of them made them look very futuristic.
For Irene Cassini's character, who's played by Uma Thurman, we used a Citroen convertible, which is, I believe, one of only 1,100 or so that exist in the world. And what we did was just added a sound effect of an electric motor as opposed to a gasoline-powered motor.
One of the buildings that Jan and Andrew wanted to use from the very beginning was the Marin Civic Center, which was the last public building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Even though they were built many years ago, they're so futuristic at the time, they really worked well. So we shot probably scenes in every area of the building and of the lot, day and night.
That building presented us with a lot of problems. One of them was that it leaked like a sieve, and it was raining while we were there. And the people who worked in the building were ready for it, because once it started raining, buckets came out from all the offices and caught the water as it fell through.
Jan Rohl's production team did a number of sketches early on of the interiors, which we would build on a soundstage and match to the exterior locations where we actually shot in LA, and also at the Marin County Civic Center. For the Gattaca computer room, while the exteriors were all shot at the Marin County Civic Center, we actually shot the interior at a warehouse in West Los Angeles.
The main computer hall was used not only as a computer hall, it was used for the entrance to Gattaca where they came up the escalators. It was used for the liftoff port where people entered to go into the tube to fly away. It was used as the training room for the Gattaca astronauts. It was used in many ways, and we had to schedule that in a finite number of days to be able to give our department time to change that over.
We found our man. It's the only specimen in the entire place that can't be accounted for.
I remember a day specifically where we geared up specifically to have a very long dialogue scene between Alan Arkin and Lauren Dean, where they walked and they talked through this huge computer hall. And we couldn't find a way to build a block-long room. So we did it through, like, not necessarily hidden cuts, but cuts. So they walked through the computer hall, and all the computers were facing one way and all the desks one way. The electrical department had rigged everything under the floor to allow for a quick change around. So the whole crew pitched in, and we changed the attitude of all the desks. Maybe we reversed them. While the art department did their sleight of hand, they moved in a few extra set pieces, whatever, and everything plugged in. Probably in about 30 to 40 minutes, we were able to now bring the cast through with maybe a slight camera change and an angle, and it looked like they were now coming through another part of the same room. We did this 3 times within one day.
Well, that's a damn shame, sir.
The scenes of the lovemaking had to be so dramatic that even though the bedroom was there at the beach, it wasn't quite there enough. So what we did is we went to a place where at low tide the ocean will go out and it's very rocky. And we built a stage, and her bedroom there at White's Point in the parking lot, only the portion of the parking lot that gets flooded when the tide comes in. So it's quite dramatic when the water is crashing underneath them.
The largest problem we had with that was to stop the surfers throwing stones at the windows. We spent a lot of money on guards for that set because there were these giant, they were almost the perfect window to throw a stone through. So we spent a lot of money guarding the windows on that set.
I remember one of the best images of the movie really is a guy going off to space in a suit.
At the time, Columbia Pictures had an issue with this. They couldn't understand, well, how can you go into space wearing a business suit? That just doesn't work. They were expecting something with a helmet and more like your classic astronaut. So what Andrew did is because, one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, Stanley Kubrick's 2001, has a number of people, in space in business suits. Andrew sent them a copy of that scene. We laid it off on a VHS tape and sent it over to the executive offices, and we never heard from them again.
It's also one of the first and only times I've ever read a script and then seen the final product, and it's been almost a mirror image. Like, it hasn't gone through any massive change in the editing process.
It had its own pace. We let those long shots linger. We allowed the slow push-ins to happen.
Vincent?
We allowed the reveals of certain characters cinematically to happen. And it makes for a truly organic, wholly beautiful piece.
When Gattaca was first released, part of the marketing campaign was we actually took out full-page ads in national newspapers for a fictitious genetic research lab where you could call in and actually have your child genetically enhanced. And even though it was bogus, we actually got thousands of people called up hoping to have their next child genetically enhanced. The original ending of the movie included a sequence that we called the Genetic Hall of Fame.
One of my favorite things that was taken out of the original showing of the movie, there was a great moment in the end where he talked about all the people who wouldn't have been born.
A series of images of people who, had we had genetic engineering before they were born, probably wouldn't have ever been born at all. People who have had a profound effect on human history, and if they didn't have whatever genetic issue that they, ended up having, they would probably have never been born. We decided at the very last minute to cut it out of the movie just because we felt like the movie itself makes the point, and we didn't want to hit the audience too hard on the head by having this add-on to it. I think over the years we have all regretted making that decision because it is a beautiful piece and it's just a really nice button on the end.
It really was ahead of its time. The ideas were ahead of its time. I mean, it's all very relevant right now. It's about the individual and what is individual rights and what is individual freedom and what is our desire to eliminate everything that's unique within us. And it's our uniqueness that makes us special.
Andrew's always been attracted to stories about the triumph of the human will, the underdog who's unwilling to accept the hand that he's been dealt. And in this case, it's genetics.
I can't believe you pulled this off. They're sending you up there.
I mean, these have been addressed in Brave New World, they've been addressed in other places, but it was a neat thing to do it via cinema.
Many, many years later, I was in a play up in Providence, Rhode Island, and there was a guy and his wife sitting next to me, and he's the head of the research department, and he reached over and he shook my hand. He said, "Thank you for making that movie. I show it to all my classes."
I've had the occasion twice to talk to kids in high school who have had Gattaca become part of their curriculum.
Gattaca is one of those movies that really has sort of stood up, and it's endured the test of time. It was so well designed and so well thought out, and the quality of work on that movie was just so uniformly good.
You can have actors standing on the most expensive set in the world, but if it doesn't connect to you emotionally, then it doesn't work.
You know, it's still, in my opinion, kind of landmark in its style, in its content.
The clean lines, the sparseness, the elegance, I think that all holds up magnificently.
It's a movie that will long outlive us all.